so much for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. It is my pleasure to introduce, as part of our series, Race, Migration, Italy, Kwanza Musi Dos Santos, who is going to give us a lecture titled Rethinking Rome, Colonial Markers, Black Activism, and the Struggle for Resignification. So Kwanza is joining us from Rome. Thank you, Kwanza, for making this long trip out to us. And so a little introduction. I mean, for those of you who might have attended events in the series before or attended events at the Casa before, my name is Isabella Livorni. I am an assistant professor in the Italian department here at NYU, and thank you so much to the department and to Casa, as always, the Casa Italiana, for letting us use this space. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kwanza. So Kwanza Musi Dos Santos is an Italian and Afro-Brazilian educator and activist specializing in anti-racism, environmental justice, and intersectionality who collaborates with organizations all over Europe. After an undergraduate degree in political science and international relations at Roma III University and Jena University in Germany, she earned her MA in Management of Cultural Diversity at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. She is a member of the advisory board at Union of Justice, a European independent people of color-led organization dedicated to racial justice and climate justice. She is also co-founder of the intercultural association Questa è Roma, created in 2013 and led by a group of young Italians of color, aimed to erase any form of discrimination through culture, politics, social awareness, and art. She has taught about Black Italy at various editions of the Black Europe Summer School in Amsterdam and was featured in Vice News' documentary about Black Lives Matter in Italy. Thank you so much, Kwanza, for coming.
Thank you, Isabella, for inviting me. Thank you to Casa Italia NYU for having me. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and talk about this thing. Let me just check if the mic is all right. Is the mic all right? Yeah? Thanks. All right. So before I dive into the topic of today, I would like you to join me in celebrating the affirmation of democracy today in Italy, because the referendum, not only the no won for those who were in favor of the no, but the most important thing for me is that we had more than 55% of voters that actually went to the polls, to the ballots. And I think this is very important because it's an almost unprecedented amount of voters. Only one time in the history of Italy we had so many voters for a referendum, especially bear in mind what happened last year with the referendum where only 30% went to vote. Yes. Yeah. So that's why I'm really glad that regardless of the result that, of course, I am in favor of, is really the result of democracy. Yeah, so democracy is still a thing. I'm glad. Yeah, so let's celebrate it together. All right. Wait. Yep. Okay. So the topic of today, I've been already introduced, so I'm not going to introduce myself anymore. Let me give you a bit of a context for those who don't have, who are not too familiar with Italians' history, especially when it comes to colonialism. As you probably know, Italy is a relatively young country, right? So it was created a bit more than 100 years ago. So it's younger than the United States, for example, if you think about it. Of course, I'm not talking about the physical geography of Italy. It's not that it popped out of the sea 150 years ago. I'm talking about as a nation, right? As a nation state. And there was this saying of abbiamo fatto l'Italia, adesso dobbiamo fare gli italiani, right? So we made Italy and now we have to make Italians. And this part of this process of creation of the identity and of stabilizing the nation was also based on racism and whiteness. Yes. And so that is when the concept of whiteness associated to Italian identity started really to be connected more and more, as opposed to the concept of otherness that was associated to the people living in the Horn of Africa, right? That's the place that Italy went and tried to colonize. Unfortunately, still today, we don't learn about Italian history enough, right? Especially when it comes to colonialism. So me, myself, for example, when I went to school, I never heard of the colonies that we used to have. I never heard of the territories we tried to occupy and colonize, right? Because there is still this motto of Italiani brava gente, Italians good people. Right? So it's a motto that we still hear today, actually, and that in some way tries to erase any possibility of starting a conversation on race, racism, racial justice in Italy, right? However, we have very clear evidences, not only the markers and monuments that I'm going to show you in a while, but also in the language. So still in Italian slang, we use the term, for example, ambaradam. Ambaradam means what a mess, yes? And so people from north to south of Italy use it to say, oh, what a mess, what an ambaradam, right? Not thinking of what that ambaradam actually means historically. Ambaradam is a place in Ethiopia where we made a massacre, right? And so that mess we're referring to is a massacre of civilians, of people, innocent people from Ethiopia that we literally killed, right? But of course, people that use this in the slang don't want to refer to, a massacre, but we use it unconsciously, right? So as I said, the legacy of colonialism is still very, very present, but it's somehow hidden in plain sight. And we're going to see more of this later. Because Italy was just 15 years old when we started going to the Horn of Africa territories, you can imagine that the level of military preparation, the level also of patriotic sentiment, that is one of the key elements for the success of a possible war or battle, was missing. And so as a result, Italy lost a lot of battles because, of course, it was trying to fight a population that has been existing firmly for over hundreds of years, right? We're talking about Ethiopia, that is a very strong country nation-wise, yeah? And so they knew their territory. They have very good military preparation. And instead, Italians just came from the Risorgimento, from the unification of Italy that also made a lot of victims. And so it was a disaster. And that's why they also implemented and used a lot of chemical weapons. Many of them were even forbidden by the Convention of Geneva. So it's quite a complicated story. So just to finish with the historic introduction, it's important to state that Italian colonialism started before fascism. The few times that we talk about colonialism in Italy, we always associate it with fascism. So we say, oh, yeah, that's when Mussolini was in power, the Ventennio, those 20 years, dark times, we put everything together and we just, put it aside, as a way to say everything happened in those 20 years, everything bad happened in those 20 years, and so we put it aside. That's not the case. It actually started before Mussolini was even born, right, in 1882. So these are for example, the territories that were occupied and colonized before fascism. As you can see, Eritrea, Somalia, and Libya, all before the 1920s. That's when the fascism came to power. And so, as I said, it's strictly connected to Italian history, and it's still a big part of Italian history, Italian identity, but we're still maybe not ready for this conversation in Italy. So this image that you see here is one of the example of hidden in plain sight that I was referring to earlier. So anybody can tell me, what is this? What is this symbol? What does it remind you? Even worse, the best friend of fascism, Nazi. That's the Nazi party symbol, right? So the eagle circled, yeah? That's the Nazi symbol. Where is this pole today? In a trash? No. It would belong there, but try. It's in Rome. It's in Termini. How many of you have been to Termini in Rome? Quite some of you. Have you ever seen this? That's right. And we're going to have a lot of examples like this. It's really hidden in plain sight. Sorry?
Where in Termini is it?
In Termini, on the road, Via dei Termini di Diocletiano, going towards Republic Square. And all around Republic Square as well, by the way, which is interesting, right? The Republic with all this Nazi symbol is quite interesting. Of course, the name of Republic Square changed after Mussolini. It was called Exidra Square, but still, it's very interesting, the unwanted combination that it creates today. So, there's another interesting story about this obelisk. So this obelisk is a very, very ancient type of monument that was located in one of the most ancient cities in Africa, in the African continent, at the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea, that is at the north of Ethiopia, Aksum. There is one of the first territory of civilizations where we have proof of civilizations. And it was located in Rome before this other monument came, right? So I have two questions for you. Number one, what is this symbolizing? The monument on the left. Try to guess. Be creative. If you don't get creative, you're never going to guess it. I promise. And if you're thinking, no, it can't be, yes, it is. Yes. Elephant? No, but I like your creativity. Appreciate it. Come on, be creative. What could it be? A victory? Like the Colonna Traiana and such? Yep, but not. All right, this is a monument to commemorate the victims of 9/11. These are the Twin Towers, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Where once stood an obelisk that we stole from Aksum during colonialism, now stands a monument for the Twin Towers. So the other question is, where's the obelisk? Where is it? In your house? No? Haven't seen it? Where's the obelisk? British Museum, that's a good one. That's a very good one, but no. They returned it. Guys, we did one good thing in all this colonial story. We did one good thing. So what is then written on this plaque? the fact that this obelisk was there and then we return it. Let me see. Nope, nothing. It's just written in the memory of the victims of 9/11, Washington, 9/11, 2001, you know? And on the other side of the plaque, it's written for the memory, right? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The irony. But nothing referring to what used to stand there. Nothing to at least brag about the one good thing we did in all this story. Nothing at all, right? So that is what I mean with hidden in plain sight. In this case, is gone in plain sight, yes. And that is why, as network that I'm going to tell you in a bit, we think that just tearing down statues, removing them is not going to be enough, because look at this, they removed it and they just canceled history, right?
That was recent then.
Yeah, it was in 2005 that they put this, and 5 years before they had returned the obelisk. So, before I tell you what are we trying to do, you probably noticed this one from the flyer of today's event. This is Dogali Monument. It's also located in Termini. Dogali is a place where we lost a battle. Yeah, so we lost the Battle of Adwa. We lost the Battle of Dogali. So why do we have a monument celebrating a loss? Because we Italians like to do things differently, yeah. So the story is that it's a very ancient example of fake news, right? So they tried to manipulate history and the narrative of history in order to literally flip the mood, right? So instead of saying, for example, the fallen of Dogali, caduti di Dogali, we see written, it's a bit blurry, but it's written to the heroes of Dogali. So transforming, enhancing, highlighting the presumed super skills of the soldiers, right, that lost their life in the battle, instead of admitting a loss, admitting to have less capacity than the Ethiopians that fought them, right? And this was the lion that was standing that they also stole from Ethiopia, the Lion of Judah that represents the unity of the nation of Ethiopia, ironically donated to Ethiopia by the French monarchy. Yeah. So as you can see on the right side, the lion is also gone. Where's the lion? In your house, someone's house, in a museum, the British Museum as well.
They gave it to Javier Milei.
To Javier Milei?
Well, he always represents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like Haile Selassie.
Have a golden medal where his head and the other, the head of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nope. Where's the lion? Yeah, they returned that too. Guys, together with the Aksum, by the way. So the whole procedure was to return the Aksum obelisk. And last minute, they thought, wait a sec, let's put the lion also so that they would stop complaining. Literally how it went. I'm not even exaggerating, right? And once again, can you see any plaque, any sign of the fact that there once stood the lion and the lion is no longer there? Nothing, right? There it is. There's a lion. It's in Addis. There's a lion in a square of Addis in front of the railway station. So, this monument has been a central location for many activity, let's put it this way. One of the most interesting that I would like to highlight is the one that took place in June 2020. So in the middle of global movement Black Lives Matter, that of course also arrived to Italy, and it had an impact in Italy as well. This was a flash mob done by the so-called network of migrant women and their daughters, right? So they took the street, they decided to go there to started to connect the dots between colonialism, Italian colonial legacy, and racism today, right? So the fact that, as I said, they're strictly connected. Many of the laws that we have still descend from that time. Many of the way we treat people of color in Italy still come from that sort of approach, that we used to have with people, especially with women of color, especially with Black women and African women, right? This hypersexualization, this constant objectification, and also animalization from a certain perspective. So this monument has been protagonist in many activity, including another one. But let me jump quickly to another important day. So February 19th, 1937, Graziani ordered a massacre in the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, because the day before he had been attacked by a group of Eritrean partisans who tried to kick him away. And of course, unfortunately, they failed. So as a result, he decided to order a massacre of civilians. Thousands of victims. We don't have an exact numbers because they didn't keep track on purpose, right? And this is the monument in Addis Ababa to commemorate that day, the victims of that day. That is Yekatit 12. So the month of Yekatit on the day 12, because Ethiopia follows a different calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. And so this is the monument to commemorate the victims of those days. And you can see also the lion, a replica of the lion there, right? And so at the top are the Italian soldiers, and at the bottom, the victims of the massacre. In Italy, we don't even talk about it, right? We don't even know what we did. We don't talk about it, let alone, embarking on a conversation on reparation whatsoever, right? And so that's why we decided to create a network in October 2022 that is called Yekatit 12-19 Febbraio. So a network that has the name of that massacre as a reminder of what we did and as a monitor to not do this again, hopefully, right? Like the plaque said. And so we're doing multiple things. Among them, we sent a decree proposal to the municipality of Rome that got approved in 2022. And so thanks to this proposal, the municipality of Rome accepted to start working on colonial legacy on the urban landscape of Rome. So looking at the street names, looking at the monuments, and start a conversation of what we did, what we do, what not to do, and stuff. And of course, also to declare officially that 19th of February as the Day of Remembrance of the victims of colonialism, of Italian colonialism. We also deposit a law proposal following more or less the same guidelines, and we're doing multiple cultural activities, artistic activities, because we know that the times of the institutions are quite long. And so in the meantime, we're working on a civil society to bring more and more awareness. Yeah, so the network is just like a coordination of different type of subjectivities, academics, activists, artists, but also collectives spread throughout Italy that I have been working for years, in some cases even 20 years, on raising awareness about the legacy of Italian colonialism. And so going back to the Dogali monument, it has been completely renovated last year in the occasion of the Jubilee. So it was not meant to be anything about resignification, but thanks to the dialogue that we had already opened with the municipality of Rome, we managed to sneak into the process and to get to call the surrounding gardens of the newly restored monument of Dogali dedicated to the memory of zerilli-marimò. Zerilli-marimò was an Eritrean partisan who was working with for the regime as a translator, and so. In 1938, when he arrived in front of the monument of Dogali, of course, he started to freak out. There are different versions of how the story went. Some say that he started to aggress people, to assault people, especially the police that were passing by at that time. In any case, he tried to protest against the presence of that monument. And so we wanted to remember his existence and his resistance, because one of the propaganda saying that we hear still today is that these people were completely passive. They accepted everything that happened. They didn't protest against it. They were actually happy because Italians built bridges and whatsoever, right? And so this is a nice little story we keep telling ourselves, but it's not the full truth, right? So it was important for us to highlight the resistance that happened in that very space. And so we had this small piece of justice, 19th of February, 2026. So very fresh news, and I'm very happy because it wasn't even meant to be for today because we planned this talk last year. But I'm very happy today to, bring this little piece of justice. So this was the day of the inauguration. As you can see, there was the responsible from the municipality for the culture side. This is a little group of the network that is much bigger than that. And then on the right side is a group of Eritreans from Rome that were celebrating. Everybody was crying. It was a very touching moment. Thanks. And so part of this work that we did with the municipality was also to create this podcast that is called Echi from Dogali. So Echoes from Dogali, where we gathered different voices talking about all the stories behind that monument, basically, to try to give back a more complex version of the story, right? Because unfortunately, it's not the full story. Also, fun fact: the nearby square, Piazza dei Cinquecento, 500 square, that is the main square where the Termini station is located. Those Cinquecento doesn't refer to the Fiat Cinquecento. It refers to these victims of the Dogali battle. However, the victims were actually 430 or something. So make it bigger, make it more excessive, make it more tragic, So once again, the purpose of fake news, the propaganda, to enhance the tragic aspect of what happened. And still today, and people don't question, why is this name? Why is this Cinquecento, right? However, on those Cinquecento, the names of the Eritreans and the Ethiopians and the Somalian mercenaries that were part of the Italian side in the army are not remembered. So we don't see their names on the monument of Dogali. So once again, it's really hard to bring out all the versions of the story of all the pieces of the puzzle. And so this was the small slogan of the day of 19th of February. That it says, "Noi tutti siamo monumenti." We are all monuments, right? So we did a sort of living library, sort of a flash mob to where all the people that participated in the podcast told their story that is behind the dogali. One more thing just to close up on what we can do with the monuments, right? I've showed you some examples, right? So we strongly believe that art can be a great tool, a great outlet to resignify in a problematic way, but also in a not oversimplified way. I've showed you what happens when we just removed, without a process behind, without having the history straight, right? And so there's another example in Bolzano where the municipality made a call for artists and picked an artistic project to resignify the bassorilievo that Mussolini did in Bolzano. And so, as you can see on the background, there is the bassorilievo made in marble by Mussolini that was written "Always Obey" or something like that. Sorry, I don't remember correctly the phrase. And then the collective, the artistic project created with the lights, with the LEDs, a different phrase from the bassorilievo letters, basically, right? And so it's written in 3 letters in Bolzanese language, in German and Italian. Nobody has the right to obey, right? So this is also another example of how you can still use what's left, what's definitely problematic, and without removing it, but just re-elaborating it. Thanks to art in this case, thanks to activism. So there's multiple ways to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kwanza. I'm going to kick us off with a question, if y'all wouldn't mind handing me the mic when you get a chance. I appreciate it. Sorry, we're gonna use the mic because otherwise the feed doesn't pick us up. So that's why we use it, even though obviously we can usually hear each other. Kwanza, thank you so much for your really rich talk. I'm really I have so many questions. I'll start us off with a few, and then I'll pass it to others. I wanted to ask, I guess starting from this podcast, Echoes of Dogali, you talked about, the gathering stories behind that monument. Who did you interview for that? How did you decide on the people you were going to interview?
Thank you for the question. That was also a collective process. So within the network, we discussed about it. Also on, the process of choosing the voices is already very political. So we discussed it a lot, on how should we choose, who should we choose, etc. And so we tried to take from multiple aspects. So we did selected voices from Eritrean people and Ethiopian people, but also from Italian side, of course. And then we also wanted to have both an academic perspective, but also an activist perspective that is always often the one that gets left out, and in most cases, right? Because it's not considered, legitimate enough. So and also some artists, I think we also interview, and people that lived in the area or that have been passing the area a lot. The recording process is also interesting because we recorded almost all interviews at the Dogali Monument. So it was also important to have this background, that is also from the sound you can situate the the narrative that is going on in that place. So it was very, 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 very interested, very participated, and very precious process. Yeah.
Yes, and you just kind of mentioned the multiple perspectives that you're trying to bring together, right? Not only the academic, but also the activist and also the artist. And I imagine also other perspectives. Can you, for me, I'm an academic, right? That's my life. And I'm really curious about how you develop these collaborations with academics and also artists as an activist. What is the kind of process? What are the difficulties of that process as well, if it's okay for you to talk about that?
No, it's a very delicate process, but for that, thankfully, we already started that in 2022 when we started the network. So inside the network already are people who are active in the network, but work as academics during the day, and then during the night they transform and become the Batman of activism or something like that, right? So we already have that conversation and that continuous collaboration going on everything we do as a network already. So that's also the strength of the network, that didn't want to overlap on anyone, didn't want to do like the extra work, because we recognize that many people were already doing work. As I said, even either individually, writing books, academia, whatever, or also doing artistic intervention or doing initiatives and divulgation. And so we just brought everything together because there was a lot of separation, discrepancy, skepticism, on who is more reliable and things like that. So we started that process with the creation of the network. So the podcast came after 2 years of strong work already. So it was quite easier.
And I'll ask one last question before I hand it off. I might jump back in again. But I'm curious, have you seen in your work as an activist in Rome, in this kind of rethinking the Roman urban landscape, which you've been doing for a really long time, minimum 13 years, if not more than that. Have you seen a shift in Romans' kind of day-to-day participation in the city? What is this kind of the effect of this work that you're doing?
It's a tricky question because, activism is a seed that you plant and then one day it will become a tree, but you don't really know when. And that is also not really the reason why you do it. Otherwise, you would stop it after a year because you get frustrated. So it really comes with activism, knowing already that you're probably never going to see the real, impact of the change that you're trying to bring. But for sure, we've noticed some differences in the way Romans get more and more aware of the place where they are. Even just the protest against what we're trying to do. That's already, a sign of an awakening that is going on, because there's not indifference like it used to be a few years ago. So even just the protest against, it means that people are more and more aware that there's something going on.
Are there protests against?
Yeah, there is Casa Pound. That, of course, is absolutely.
Can you explain what Casa Pound is?
Casa Pound is what is Casa Pound? It's a group that should be illegal by law, because by law you cannot have a openly fascist party or group anymore. But apparently, it's still on, and it's the main office is located a few meters away from the Dogali monument in one of the most multicultural neighborhood of Rome, that is Piazza Vittorio Squilino. So it's quite interesting already from starting from this, and so the Casa Pound, but also there is an association of the descendants of the fallen of Dogali. So the fallen soldiers of Dogali descendants have an association, and they gather there every week, to, remember their relatives and things like that. So there was also conversation. So we were fearing also like a backlash from them, but apparently they stayed quiet, or they didn't come to know about it soon enough. I don't know. Either way, we're glad that at least we managed to put the thing there. But yeah, I mean, we should still stay vigilant because, anytime they can tear the plaque down or try to, manipulate it. So it's a constant work.
I'm gonna go ahead and pass around the mic, if that's okay. I see we've got a hand back there, and then we can come up to see.
Thank you. Ciao, buonasera. You mentioned very briefly that there were Eritrean and Somali fighters that fought on behalf of Italy at Dogali. And I just wondered if you could say more about how did that happen? Were they recruited? Did they volunteer? If you could just say more about that.
Absolutely. So there are a couple of books that were written. The Eritreans mercenary were called Askari Eritrei. So if you look up the word, you're gonna find some sources about it that explain better about their lives and stuff. But it was a very interesting process because in some ways they were blackmailed, to be part. In some other case, they were promised a lot of money that they never got, and so then they decided to abandon the field, or pass on the other side again. In some other cases, the Italians tried to weaponize the ethnic diversity, the ethnic tension between some Ethiopians to try to bring them on their side, So we're going to fight the Amhara against the Tigray, and so come with us to fight the Tigray people, right? Mm-hmm. So weaponizing this type of tension. So it was a very mixture process. And the same happened with Somalian and Eritreans, actually, because there was quite a high tension between the two nations. And so the Somali went to Ethiopia to try to fight the Ethiopians, and in a way, as our enemy. So the friend of my enemy is my enemy, or something.
Correct.
What's the saying? Yes. Anyways, yeah. So there were different process going on the recruitment of this type of soldiers, but in almost all cases, they were never treated equally. They were never paid, and
not recognized.
And not recognized at all. We have very little document sources about their names,
And just one other question. I don't know if the work of is it Yakati? Dodici?
Dogali?
No, your
Yakati.
network.
Yakati, yeah.
Yakati 12 Febbraio. I don't know if part of your work also going to be to try to remove the Nazi symbolism in that square?
Yeah, I mean, eventually we're going to talk about removing some stuff because for sure some stuff cannot be up there. But as I told you, we're very careful with the removing, with the R word, because as I showed you, that's just going to be an alibi to deny history. That is the very point that we're trying to make. So for sure, whenever the time is right, I hope. But the step before that is really to become aware, because I'm quite positive that the mayor himself, he doesn't know. He didn't see it, but as all of you didn't see it, and you've been to Rome multiple times. So, yeah, thank you.
You mentioned renaming streets, and I was wondering what that includes. I mean, there's La Zona Africana.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, Quartiere Africano. So, interestingly enough, Quartiere Africano is a sort of slang term because there's no official documents of Rome reporting that name, right? Because that neighborhood in Rome is actually called Quartiere Trieste, right? But it's called like that in jargon because most of the street names there are from the colonial former territories, yeah? So many people think Quartiere Africano means the neighborhood where many African resides. Is actually the opposite. It's a middle class up to upper class neighborhood that was created for the colonial aristocracy of that time, yeah? And so one of the member of the network, it's a TZ Association, that is an association that is doing walking tours in the Quartiere Africano to, bring awareness once again to the presence of these names of the street, the fact that they're not just by accident, but they refer to specific time, to specific geography, also politically. So it's very interesting because they gather the stories of the Eritreans that lived in Rome in different times and how they, relate to those names of those streets, and also how it's weird for them to find themselves in Rome in a neighborhood that looks like a lot Asmara, because Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, was built architecturally to be exactly like Rome, right? So it's very interesting also these connections. And with the municipality of Rome, the municipality already accepted to change the name of 10 streets, not only in Quartiere Africano, but also in other areas of Rome, from a list that we gave them. For now, just digitally, which is a, little step, baby steps, very baby steps. So just digitally. So if you look for it, we simply ask to complement the description of the street names, because they were just written via Asmara, without anything. Right, Asmara what? Asmara where? So we just asked to be Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, a former possession of colonial Italy or something like that, right? So just to complement, yes, Asmara what, right? So for now, it's just digitally, because as you know, also many of the streets are on the marble plaque, so it's going to take a while, and it's also a lot of money. But as I said, baby steps, but we are continuing the work.
Now, in America, the street name changing has to do with slaveholders a lot. Is there a parallel there as well?
What do you mean? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, right. About removing, we asked definitely, the only thing we definitely want to be removed is the names of colonial generals or things like that, because absolutely that is just celebrating a dictator or a killer, a murderer. So absolutely, that is the only thing that we absolutely agree on removing. But as I said, it's still part of the conversation. But the conversation is taking place. Yeah.
So I want to kind of continue with this line that Isabella was building, and the kind of reaction to these renaming. So, for example, in the U.S., we have kind of two set of contested monuments, Columbus statues, where Italian Americans have created like fake histories around them having to do with the lynchings, has nothing to do with the lynching, for example, or outright denial of history, and then Confederate monuments, and the kind of defense of that has been heritage, despite the fact that most of them went up in the 1950s in response to civil rights and in the 1890s in response to Jim Crow. So I'm curious about the kind of manufactured histories and memories that are being built in response to the work that you're doing and challenging these colonial monuments in Rome. Thanks.
Well, the Twin Towers monument is already one, right? That was done very recently without, completely trying to erase what was there before. Another example is Indro Montanelli's statue in Milan. Same thing was done in 2006. So like long after he did what he did in Eritrea, where he allegedly married a 12-year-old as he was 26, So
what's Casa Pound saying? Is this our history? How they?
in the case, it depends case by case. So in the case of Montanelli, people were saying he's the father of journalism. We cannot, bring bad reputation on him. We have to protect him, separate the art from the artist kind of thing, and some people dare to underline what he said in the famous interview on YouTube, saying, "Oh, but in those geographies, that's normal, culturally accepted to marry a 12-year-old," things like that. Some people even dare to say that just to defend, the father of journalism, in the case of the Twin Towers, for example, nobody is still questioning it because people really it's a rear crossroad, right, where people only pass in car because there's no walkable path all around that. So you really have to go intentionally in order to first see the plaque, what does it refer to, the monument, and then question it. So many of the things go under the radar like that, basically. From both sides, so from both the protester, but also from the activists, and so that is also why we're trying to build awareness. But yeah, the backlash, in some cases, it's about Italian identity, or as I said, there was during fascism, so that is why, and in many cases, it's not the case because it was before fascism. But there's a lot of confusing the enemy's approach, to because we're very ignorant about that type of history, that page of history. So that is why it's really from one hand complicated, but from the other hand interesting process because it's in the making. As we go, as the more we discover or uncover stories or the presence of monuments, the more then, in some cases, people react to that. But they weren't saying anything before that day, right? So it's interesting.
So I understand your focus is the physical world, the monuments, the built world, but is this not covered in textbooks, in history class?
Nope.
It's just erased. It's been erased.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Colonialism is absolutely the only colonialism we talk about in Italy in history class is the British Empire, the French Empire, the Portuguese, the Spaniards. Nothing about Italy. Not even a mention. Nothing at all.
About 8 years ago, I went to an event at the I can't remember the name, but it's the NYU Spanish Center, like Casa Italiana, but for Spain. And they were saying there that the Civil War, now maybe it's changed, but the Civil War was basically not covered in textbooks because it's such a point of pain still. People's grandparents or great-grandparents, as the case may be. And so just erased completely.
Yeah, in the case of Italy, I don't think it's a lot about pain. I really think it's about this Italiani brava gente motto. We really want to believe that Italians are good people. We don't do bad things. We always behave right. Italy is the paradise, pasta, great food, great life. It's still building on that marketing facade. Absolutely. So anything that goes against this idea, this idealistic idea, sorry about the word game, is terrible, is unacceptable. And so we deny it. Yeah.
I have two questions. Thank you so much for coming and presenting. Grazie. One, do you face tension between the work you're doing and the modern migratory issues Italy faces, especially in Rome? And two, in 2026, what do you think it means to be Italian?
Thank you for the question. So if I zoom out, on this photo, and that is why I brought this photo. As you can see, the previous setting of the Dogali monument didn't have a fence around it, right? So the fence came with the renovation of last year, right? For decorum, they said. But this is what they wanted to prevent. Immigrant people sitting on the stairs of the monument of our forefathers, right? That fought to liberate Italy, whatever. So yeah, this has a lot to do with this. And that is why also we decided to work on the urban landscape of Rome. And especially in Termini, that is an area very much populated by immigrant people, by people constantly in transition for multiple reasons, because there is this need also to reappropriate some spaces, and to break also this rigid division of spaces as well. So that is what also the Association Tizeta tries to do with the walking tours in the Quartiere Africano, because it's a place where nobody goes for a stroll or, if they don't live or reside there. So that is also a political act to go around with people of multiple backgrounds and stroll around the neighborhood, listening to the voices of people from Eritrea that also stroll around that neighborhood while they were recording the walking tour audio, right? So that is also a political act that we're trying to do to reappropriate the space in this way, to resignify and to reaffirm our presence, our existence, and our right to the space.
What about what it means to be Italian in 2026? The other question. So we'll just leave that. Big question.
Next question. No, it's a really long question. I think, a bit also what Questa Roma is and stuff is really about, how much you care about, the city in this case, because it's a local association, how you identify to the city. It's very interesting how children of immigrants identify a lot more with the city they grew up than Italian. So many of us still struggle to identify ourselves as Italian, right? In many cases because of the trauma of not having the Italian citizenship for years, so not being Italian on paper. But rarely anybody doesn't identify with the city they grew up in, right? So I'm not sure I'm Italian, but I'm definitely Bolognese, or I'm definitely Bergamasco, or I'm definitely Roman, like Afro-Roman or something like that. So there's a lot of identification with the city because it's literally the place that raised us, right? The city, the people, the community, the neighbors, even the annoying neighbors, it's part of us, because, it shaped our identity a lot. So I think, that being Italian today is more related to the local setting where you grew up.
Hi, thank you so much. I guess I had a question that maybe is not a question, but you were discussing earlier of sort of this refusal to acknowledge colonial history in Italy, and I'm just wondering, I hear a lot about it because compared to other European countries, Italy had fewer colonies, so I don't know if that could also be sort of the perception. But I was also thinking about it, you were mentioning, and the first slide showed that you were saying that the colonies didn't start before fascism. And I think that's very important. I'm wondering if you can speak more about that in terms of how, as you show in that first slide, all the colonies did start though after 1861. And so to me, when I was writing a thesis a bit about this, it seems like it was part of the nation building of emerging Italy in 1861. And so I do think there is maybe to some extent a continuum between that nation building in the 19th century and then fascism. Like they are tied in my mind. And I don't know if this is a conversation that people are having in Italy or in the history departments, but
Not really. We're trying to push them to have this conversation. Absolutely. I can tell you there's historians who still ignore the history of colonialism of Italy. I can tell you that. And it's very normalized because maybe they specialize on Middle Age or on Roman times and whatever. And so like they just skipped that part of history in their studies. So it's still very normalized to not know about and not talk about and not research about. But also because we lack resources. So if you think about, for example, Angelo Del Boca, who was one of the first to write about Italian colonialism, he's a journalist. He's not a historian, right? So the first historians that wrote about, extensively and more objectively about Italian colonialism were way more recent, And so, absolutely, colonialism was a big part of nation building. That is also why Italy made this adventure, because it was literally an adventure to, go on the other side of the Horn of Africa without a military preparation, without the people even speaking the same language, right? Because it was an element of prestige in the landscape of late 1800 Europe, where all the big nations had colonies, and were making profit out of them. And so Italy couldn't stay out of it because it had to affirm its position, its prestige in the landscape of nations. So absolutely, it was mostly driven by that goal. Absolutely, but still the way we talk about colonialism is still very superficial, very fragmented. There's still a lot to do. Yeah.
But I know, like, when I was discussing this with a friend, he was saying, like, for example, before unification, there were foreign empires, basically, or not empires, but foreign power struggles in Italy itself. So in a way, it's sort of like unification was getting rid of those colonizers, if you want to call them that, in Italy itself. So I don't know, I just feel like...
no, absolutely.
It feels like there are multiple layers.
There's multiple layers. There's multiple layers. As I told you, also a lot about the resistance, of the Ethiopians, the Battle of Adwa, the win of the Battle of Adwa literally opened to then the consequent fight for independence in many African states from the other colonies, from the other European colonizers, and then to the African Union. That is why the African Union is based in Addis Ababa, So it's had a big impact. But in Italy, we barely talk about the Battle of Adwa because we lost, And so, like, we cannot afford that for our reputation.
I want to close our kind of public Q&A, but Kwanza, if you're okay with people coming up to you afterwards, if you have comments or questions, I will say Kwanza is always an incredibly generous interlocutor. And Kwanza, would you mind going back to your first slide about... I think it's Mapping Black Europe. Is that the the collection that you're...
Oopsie.
Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit? Some of what you talked about today is based on a chapter that you wrote in this volume. Can you talk to us a little bit about the volume or anything in the chapter that you didn't kind of get a chance to?
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me that. Mapping Black Europe is a great project that we did 2 years ago with a group of fellows, academics and activists. So it's really one of a kind because it's one of the few books about Black Europe by Black Europeans, right? And it's interesting because there's 8 chapters. Each chapter is focused on a city, and it's is narrated. Each city is narrated by people who actually grew up in that city. So in my case, I wrote about Rome, and so it's a very nice intertwine between autobiography and also the more objective things that happened during the time. It starts from the legacy of Black Lives Matter 2020 global movements, and then it talks about the different markers in each respective city. And it's interesting also because there's also cities that goes under the radar in many times. So, for example, there's Oslo, Norway. Nobody associate Norway with colonialism. There's Poland. Nobody associate Poland with colonialism. Italy. Nobody associate Italy with colonialism. Germany as well, right? So we used to associate Germany with World War II and Nazi, but not necessarily with colonialism. So it's very, very interesting also to compare the cities, the different, situations that happen in different times or in similar times in different cities. So it's very, very interesting. I really recommend it to you. You can find it on the transcript website. It's open access PDF, or you can get the hard copy. And this was also like a political choice because this type of knowledge must be accessible, at least virtually, to anyone, especially when it comes from, people of color, Black people that struggle to get our voices out there. So absolutely, really recommend.
Thank you so much, Kwanza. I really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us.
Thank you for having me. Really, get my contacts. Feel free. If you come to Rome, we can do a decolonial walking tour to see more of the monuments I showed. This is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. There's so many monuments. Forget about the Colosseum. There's more. Thank you.